and I wanted to have him on just to kind of introduce his Substack to my audience. We have with us Chris Bray. How you doing, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I wanted to have you on because I've really enjoyed some of your different posts that you've made. Can you give us a little background about why you created the Substack? Or is your background in writing, or what's your background that got you into this?
My background was in writing. I used to be a journalist. I used to cover local news and was a freelancer, and I got a PhD in history and decided not to become a professor. So I have done a bunch of writing and mostly had stopped. I find the media very frustrating. And I started writing a Substack page because I was reading Substack. I love Substack. I love the disintermediation. I love hearing people's voices directly without narrative policing, without teams of editors and all that stuff. I like hearing what people really have to say. So I said, what the heck? And I started writing a Substack page. It's been really enjoyable to do.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the way that you have analyzed culture, and I think we need to do more of that here in the mainstream and broadcast spaces like what we're doing here. Your Substack is called Tell Me How This Ends. Can you tell me a little bit about that name, where you get that idea?
That name comes from David Petraeus wandering around Iraq during the Iraq War, saying to people, tell me how this ends. It means we've boxed ourselves into a corner. We didn't think about where we were going, and now we've trapped ourselves, and what are we going to do about it?
So how did we as a culture trap ourselves into a dead end in that analogy? Does it start with, where do you start the storyline? I mean, you can trace it back to Adam and Eve, but where do you start the storyline of how we got into this pickle that we're in societally, where everything seems upside down, and the more you struggle against the upside down world, the more it seems to entrench itself like a trap, like you're caught in a trap, and the more you struggle, the more it hurts you.
Yeah. I think there's 50 different answers, and you could go back to Adam and Eve. It actually is a good start, but the current iteration of the trap we put ourselves in, I think, has a lot to do with something that Christopher Lasch wrote about. And Christopher Lasch wrote about what he called the intellectual as social type. He talked about the development of an overlapping set of elite statuses that have to do with opposition, that you become a cultural elite, you become an important person because of what you hate, what you disdain, because you say, I'm not some Trump person out there in my trailer park in flyover country. You've just become elite because of your disgust for other people. And I think that process got underway in earnest in the progressive era with people like Woodrow Wilson. And Angelo Codevilla has written about that development of an elite status around what you hate and what you aren't, and who you have disdain for. And I think we've reached the end of that road. I don't think having a society where we declare ourselves to be great people because we hate our friends and neighbors and hate other people is working. I think that road has reached its dead end.
But wouldn't the establishment say, hey, look, America has always had these identities based on hate? I mean, the new fashion right now is to say that whiteness is a construct that is imbued with hatred and otherizing other people who are not white or don't act white. What would you say to that argument that, hey, that's been a running theme of America through different epochs, is hating the other and excluding them to get your status?
Yeah, hating the other has been a theme throughout American history. I mean, I don't think it's only been white and black. I mean, Protestants hated Catholics and burned convents in Boston and Philadelphia. As a solution, focus on whiteness and the current discourse about whiteness, I think, is more of an extension of the problem than an effort to solve the problem. I think it leaves us in the same trap, saying, I don't believe we should judge people by their race, and I wish you white people could understand that, is just more of the same. It feels like an attempt to promulgate further division when we should be trying to find ways to talk to each other.
I mean, we've had these narratives to various degrees throughout even recent, contemporary history. In the 90s, they were doing this kind of pitting people against each other by race and tribalism of various sorts, of feminism versus patriarchy and these things. Why is it so nauseating now? Why is it so, without any ground now? Is it the internet? That's an answer people give out. Trump? What is it?
The internet is certainly helping. But do you know Herbert Marcuse's essay on repressive tolerance?
No.
Herbert Marcuse was a Marxist scholar who wrote an essay. He's an important figure of the New Left. Wrote an essay saying, we have a tradition in America of tolerance, but we need to recognize that tradition is really an artifact of repression when we say we'll tolerate any form of speech and that tolerance is a positive value. We're saying we'll tolerate classism, we'll tolerate racism, we'll tolerate sexism. So the way, he said, to become a fair and a just society is to repress the intolerant and to have a repressive tolerance, to say we'll tolerate any kind of discourse that advances human progress, that serves the cause of human equality, and that is politically acceptable to us. It was the opening gambit of the all disagreement is hate speech maneuver.
I see.
Available. You can get the whole text online. You Google Herbert Marcuse, Marcuse, repressive tolerance. It's a fascinating and a very telling essay.
Well, when
but
we continue,
here we are in this moment where
I want to take a quick break. When we continue with Chris Bray, we'll unpack more about Herbert Marcuse and how his ideas shape the world we're in today. Check out his Substack, by the way, chrisbray.substack.com. More with him after these short messages. Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your host, David Gornoski. I'm speaking with Chris Bray, talking about his Substack project, which has really caught a lot of people's interest because of his ability to really try to hone in on the real meat of the matter of what's going wrong with our culture today. So, Chris, before the break, you were mentioning about Herbert Marcuse and an essay about him from him, right?
Mm-hmm. Called Repressive Tolerance.
Now, he was funded by he came from the OSS, right? I've heard people say that a lot of these people who have made up the intellectual foundation for wokeism actually came from the intelligence community or had support or connections to him. Is that right?
I don't know if that's right, but it wouldn't surprise me at all.
So why would the intelligence community have an interest in promoting a Marcuse? What does it benefit them? Seems kind of bizarre to the average person living their life. They're like, I thought the intel community is there to protect us from, foreign actors and dangerous, terrible groups around the world or home. Why would they want to push obscure, critical theory or, French postmodernism in some cases?
I mean, Marcuse was very, very happy and comfortable everywhere he went. Was at Berkeley for a long time. He was pushed by a lot of people, and I think he was pushed by a lot of people because I think the identity of elite status coming from the idea of what you hate. I think the New Left came up with a different way to advance the football that we'd been moving for a long time. I think the idea of disdaining or having distaste for middle America as a founding principle is a thing that makes you a really good person, is coloring our lives now and getting into our families and harming our families. I think it's harming our connections between us. So, I mean, if you're looking to destabilize a society, destabilize families, destabilize neighborhoods, destabilize connections between individual people. I was writing about all this in the context of public health and saying, look, there's so much that we oppose, so much that I oppose, and all of that I'm outraged by all of the attack on choice. And I think we need to resist these folks really aggressively. But the second problem is we have family members, we have people in our own household who are, believe in the project. We have people in our own families who say, like, why aren't you listening to Dr. Fauci? And I have been trying to find a way through that problem. I've been trying to say, how do you resist deranged authority, but hang on to personal relationships that are damaged by that deranged authority?
Right. And that's an interesting tension that I think we have to really wrestle with on a lot of different levels. They call themselves a progressive movement that birthed things like the public health policies as we use them today, and the things that we've kind of inherited from that Wilsonian generation and so forth. But you mentioned something interesting. You said that they're united by this disgust for people who are in the middle of America, the working class folks, Christians, things that are considered passé or not cool, not edgy or whatever, not avant-garde. They have disgust for normal, structures of families and so forth. They want to rewrite those things. They want to call, if you identify with the gender that you are, you're considered cisgendered because that word sounds nasty. It's very good marketing when you want to upend people's normalcy. But, those are right-wing things, aren't they? I thought disgust is a right-wing thing. Is this a right-wing movement? Is this a reactionary movement?
I don't think right and left are working particularly right now. No, I think that we're facing something that presents entirely as left, although I don't think it entirely is. Twix. The Twix commercial with the witch?
No.
Twix made a commercial. Twix, the candy bar, made a commercial about. This is really easy to find online. You got to watch this because it's a mind-blowing thing. Twix made a commercial about a witch dressed all in black with a kind of witch hat who shows up at a house where she's babysitting. Uh-huh. And the child she's babysitting turns out to be a transgendered child. And the witch takes the transgendered child to the park and is babysitting the transgender child at the park, and a cisgendered child comes and taunts the transgendered child, and the witch concentrates and casts a spell and makes the cisgendered child fly away, like she destroys this cisgendered child who taunts the transgendered child. This is a commercial for a candy bar. How do you unpack the ideology of a giant corporation making a candy bar commercial where a witch hurts a child because he's anti-trans? I don't think we can talk in a coherent way about left and right now. I think our world has been torn up in such bizarre ways, and so much of power is calling itself left, that I don't know how far the label gets us.
And it's always under the guise of victim concern. All this bizarre stuff happens with concern for the outsider, concern for the scapegoat, concern for the least of these being the aesthetic that drives the crazy stuff that we see around us, and the violence and the domination attempts and so forth. How do you scratch that itch of being concerned for victims but not taking the bait of the establishment and orienting that concern towards tyrannical solutions?
That is the question of the moment, and we are being manipulated. We are being manipulated by in extraordinary ways, and just seeing that the narrative is not taking you the place that it's supposed to be taking you. Kamala Harris is starting this replacement disinformation board.
Uh-huh.
Have you seen this news?
Yeah, I heard about it.
And the stories about it say we have to have a disinformation board because the internet and our public sphere is full of disinformation because of racism and sexism and misogyny and xenophobia. So you're against racism and xenophobia, right? You're not in favor of being cruel to women and immigrants. So the promise is give government lots more power to decide what you're allowed to speak and read and write and say. And if you do that, you'll be fighting against cruelty. I think recognizing that narrative redirection, that attempt to take, I love the way you put it, to take a protective instinct to protect the least of these and turning it into an aggressive attack on core values, the core values of a smaller republic, things that are basic to human rights. Recognize that you're being manipulated. Recognize that the way the discussion is being framed deliberately changes the subject.
Do you believe that constitutional republicanism is strong enough to resist this crazy direction we're spiraling into of nihilism?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, and I don't think anyone knows how it ends. I like to believe that it does, but there's certainly room to doubt. Right. Ultimately, I think what Adam said, a republic works as long as it has a virtuous people. I think the solution is in our families and in our personal relationships and our personal values and in our neighborhoods before it's in our form of government, although I would hope that our form of government would work.
Yeah, it's very well said, and it's one of the themes of our program. You are a student of history, I can tell by your writing, and you told me that's your background too. So I'm interested to see. We'll have to maybe save it for another time where we'll do a deep dive together on a Things Hidden podcast that I do, where we can explore maybe how some of this works on an anthropological level. I've seen that you've written some great posts about the connection between cult programming and the way that the dominant narrative, acts upon people's minds and their relationships. And I think your example of seeing it happen in your own family is an example of how difficult this problem is. When someone becomes really enamored with a cult groupthink, it's very difficult to deprogram them from that,
Yeah. And if you just walk away from them, if you just destroy your family, you're destroying the foundation of social stability. You're destroying the basis of society. So it's a brutal problem. I don't know how we solve it.
I think that has something to do with what Jesus said when he said mother will be against daughter and father will be against so on and so forth. I think it has something to do with what we're living in right now.
Absolutely.
Chris, I really appreciate your time, and I want people in our audience to check out chrisbray.substack.com, where you can see his blog posts. Very interesting stuff, very good stuff. chrisbray.substack.com. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.